thanks everyone for coming on to talk today. Today's subject matter is going to be young people education and youth work. But first of all, before we go anywhere else, can we go round and everyone introduce themselves and give a bit more of a background about their professional history? Deborah's already asked that question, but we can do it again. So who wants to jump in first? Who wants to start?
Ladies first, I feel.
Oh, Stuart, honestly,
Stuart.
what can I say with that?
Watch out for him.
Yeah, so my name is Deborah Taras. In terms of my identity, I have been a youth and community worker for, oh gosh, nearly 30 years. In regards to my profession, I started off as a scout leader, volunteering as a scout leader, doing my Duke of Edinburgh, and then realised I absolutely found my vocation, really enjoyed working alongside young people, and the rest they say is history. Far too long to go into where I've been and what I've done, but currently where I am now, I am a qualified youth worker. I'm also a qualified teacher as well. An assessor, EPA, done academia, worked at the University of Cumbria as well as working for the National Youth Agency. But I'm a CEO of a very small but mighty organisation called United Youth Alliance, and we develop the capacity of the sector. We do a lot of research, we do a lot of training. Currently fortunate to be working alongside some fabulous colleagues in Liverpool and in Cornwall and in Blackpool and the Fylde Coast in particular, working alongside organisations like the Boathouse and other organisations. And we are currently creating a coast of social action across the Fylde Coast to be the first in the country, whereby we facilitate the space for young people to have a voice and have influence and impact to be able to shape the things that matter to them. Is that all right?
That's beautiful. Love that.
Set the bar this high.
Yeah, how do we follow that?
There we go.
Come on, Stuart, you can do
go on,
it.
Stuart.
Go for it.
Come on, Stuart.
So I am Stuart Woodburn. I am a head teacher. I've also been involved in youth work in South East London around night time, and youth work in Worcester as well. I have been in education for 20 years, and I am also setting up a charity that kind of works with schools and linking up schools in Africa, the Americas, and the UK. And that's me, short, in a nutshell.
Perfect. Thank you, Stuart.
I'll lower the bar for you, Craig, so you can come in between.
The bar wasn't lowered. The bar was
The
different.
bar's about to go a lot lower.
Craig, over to you.
So my name's Craig Johnson. I have worked with young people for many a year, since the probably early to mid 90s. I started working with young people in different capacities, mostly around sport at that time. And before moving to America for years and working in adolescent psych unit for a good 7 or 8 years, moving back to East London and working there in an alternative provision back in 2001, and pretty much from then worked in children's safeguarding with kids predominantly on the margins of various communities before getting a job in higher education as a senior lecturer in criminology about 7, 8, 9 years ago. But my research has always been around kids in and around the margins of various, exploited, vulnerable, even though I don't like quite those words, but children who are potentially could take various pathways depending on what's available to them resources wise. But I am a qualified youth worker. I'm also teacher, psychology and things like that. So I've just accumulated lots of knowledge, but always with the child at the centre, which I think is fundamental to youth work, really. And I think that's what youth workers do very well.
And that is why you were all invited on.
Oh.
So let's jump into the first question. How well does the current UK education system prepare young people, not just academically, but for real life? Things like mental health, careers, and relationships. I'll put that out to the crowd, or I can choose someone if need be.
You know, when you sent us this question, I had a real, not a dilemma, but I was really thinking about that. And a little bit of me was thinking, okay, where is the responsibility within the school, within the teachers? And again, probably like with Craig, I'm vintage. So 30 years, we've seen some really fantastic relationships built between youth workers and schools as well, and about how we can really support that development of young people. So I don't want to come onto this call and start doing a bashing in schools, because I think they get enough of that. And I think the exploration is about really, probably for me, more about how can we work better in supporting schools and supporting our colleagues within the sector who perhaps aren't, who are perhaps maybe feeling the weight of Ofsted, which I do appreciate, you know, does have highlights that in terms of what we support young people with. So I guess I'm probably coming from a direction of how can we support and work better. I don't know what the other guys think of that.
I had an interesting conversation with a lady who has written several reports for the DFE, and around kind of SEND and how we meet the needs of children, but kind of all that kind of well-being and just kind of how well the school's doing in that. And I sat down at a meal, sat opposite her, and I was quite brazen and just said, schools are failing our children. And she stopped me and said, no, it's not the system, it's not schools, it's actually, and as a head teacher, this is quite hard to hear, she said it's head teachers as leaders who are not thinking out of the box enough, because actually the curriculum and things in place are actually there, and you can kind of go down that line and be more creative and think out of the box on how to support children. And I was like, oh, okay, wow, that's quite threw back in my face. So since then, I've actually had to think really carefully about how do we support children and how can we. And I do agree, Deborah, because it's not just our job. You know, we look at society, parenting, or, you know, communities. Everyone has a part to play. But what is my part as a head of a school? And so we've actually implemented lots of new things as a school just to try and look at those areas, well-being, resilience, all those kind of things, and I can share those later. But yeah, I do think it's, as Deborah said, a group thing. It's not just schools, actually. It shouldn't be down to that, because that's we're there really generally to teach.
Interesting what you said then, and I would have guessed, and again, the assumption is not really the way forward, is it? But I would have thought that you probably don't have the flexibility to be, you know, that try those different things and dynamic kind of ways of working, but maybe you do. It's interesting.
Well, that was my thought, but it was nice for her to challenge me, because that really made me think out of the box and say, okay, what can I do that's flexible and kind of creative within that national curriculum, within what we, you know, are kind of statutory told to do, and that has helped in my school help us think out of the box. And we created this leadership passport. We come up with all these different things in place in our school that really kind of support children around that area. So yes, if I'm going to be devil's advocate, I do think schools can probably do a bit more, but I really do agree that it isn't up to us to do so. It should be a village raises a child.
Yeah.
Agreed. Great.
I'm going to defend schools here. I've worked in and out of schools for many, many years, as a lot of sort of multi-agency paraprofessional professionals do. I think schools are between a rock and a hard place, to be honest with you. And partly because they are the only statutory service that educates children that are kind of left as educators, in a sense. And also we need to consider that not all schools are equal in terms of resources, in terms of staffing, in terms of the complex issues and concerns that some young people bring into those spaces, particularly in sort of under-resourced communities. And disproportionately, we know that there are certain schools in certain areas that have vastly more of those particular issues, and therefore their budgets are impacted. And I'm telling Stuart exactly what he knows. But those things are really, really crucial. So for me, the role of youth workers, the role of multi-agency work, is to support and work closely with schools to try to deal with or navigate some of those particular issues. Now, the issue with that is when I first started youth work, and Debbie may agree, that youth work wasn't focused on things that it's focused on now. Youth work was very focused on working with the child where they are, and allowing the child that voluntary relationship to build, which I think then transcends itself into school and other relationships and seeing adults differently and things like that. Where now, and the reason that I kind of pulled away from youth work was very targeted. So you go in, you've got 8 sessions to work with a child, or, you brought in to talk about drugs and crime or whatever else. That effectively for me is not youth work, as I understand what youth work is. So not only have you got schools dealing with multiple issues, and of course with the new white paper coming out, they're going to have to deal with more. I don't know how they're going to do that. But certainly central to this is multi-agency. But the problem we've got after so many cutbacks to services is things like family hubs, which is fine, but actually they're just a shadow of things like education welfare, other services that really were freestanding and could support schools in different ways. So it's a bit of a rock and a hard place situation, I think, for a lot of people.
I think you've raised some really good points there in regards to actually where I suppose the lens has to then come on actually youth work and about how we have adapted. And I don't know about you, Craig, but I fell into the teaching side because of the impact that it was having on us as youth workers, because we all lost our jobs in 2010 because of the cuts. So a lot of us did actually look at what else, and I went into the post-14 sort of remit by chance really, so I was able to develop my practice. And then obviously came back into youth work and then was able to offer accredited outcomes for young people. But I think you've hit the nail on the head a little bit by, where does youth work stand now? Because obviously we were all very much about that's that informal education. That was our pedagogy. That's how we approached it. Linking in with obviously what are schools expecting us from us now. And I think a lot of that's got to do with the academization of schools. A lot of our schools up here and on the Fylde Coast are academies, some aren't. But also, I don't know about you guys, and I don't know about you, Stuart, but we've lost the contacts within schools. And even when we're offering free funded projects, opportunities like stuff we're doing around social action and youth voice, it's very hard to get into the schools because I feel as though actually they're still judged mainly on their exam results, and schools are saying, no, actually what we've got to do now is we've got to concentrate on these young people sausage factory, get them with their GCSEs. And I have to say, I'll finish on this bit, Craig, I do feel as though perhaps we're looking at PSHE. I mean, I've got colleagues of mine as teachers who deliver PSHE. Yes, some are qualified to do that and some aren't. Some of it is classed as an add-on to their job.
And I suppose that's kind of linking to that point of you not being able to get into schools. Is that because, and again, I'm a head teacher, so I feel like I'm attacking myself, but kind of they're so focused on those academics and as you say, because it's being driven by all those results, outcomes, that they're too afraid to go, actually, I want to broaden it and actually support these children. And again, that comes back to that point. Are we too scared to do that? Are we thinking out of the box enough? Because you saying that, I would love for you to come to my school. I mean, we are primary, but we actively encourage people to come in and talk to our students. And I'm kind of going off on a tangent a bit, but I would love people to come in and mentor. Because for me, mentoring, I think you mentioned, Craig, back in youth work back in the day, that for me is key. I think every child should have a mentor, really, because navigating life these days is so difficult, and having someone there to support and mentor them is just, I feel, what we need. And now as a school, obviously, we can do that to a certain extent with a class teacher and support, but you've got 30 children in your class, or you can have a pastoral lead, but you've got 400 people that you oversee. So you can't be able to mentor, but having a mentor is just so key to navigate through life. And that for me is when I've been involved in youth work back in London, that's actually what helped those youth.
Can I ask a question a second, Stuart? Just just what's interesting, because we're bordering on the next question anyway, and I might as well ask the next question. But something that might kind of feed into this: do schools have set budgets to engage with organisations, voluntary sector organisations, specifically around the curriculum or additional enrichment, whatever those things might be? Do they have a budget for it? Because what Deborah's talking about is things being funded and great opportunities, and I guess part of the challenge isn't it, is having those relationships with the staff in the schools that will then
Absolutely.
and this kind of comes on to the question. So I'm going to read the question, but I think it feeds into it. So what role should youth work play alongside schools in supporting young people aged 8 to 25, and is it currently valued enough in the UK? Because the question that Deborah put out there, who knows what the answer is to that, but do we think it is valued enough?
So with budget wise, just to answer that question, schools, obviously their budget's getting slimmer and slimmer, and I won't go into that because we'll be here all night, but budgets are tighter, but it's up to the school obviously to set where that money goes, and there'll be certain budget lines. So I have a budget line around enrichment activities, so I can determine and put money in there, and then obviously that can go out for things that we do that enrich those experiences above and beyond, obviously in the classroom, the national curriculum, etc. So yes and no, because budgets are getting tighter and tighter. So hence why if there's free stuff, like Deborah mentioned, I mean, as a head, I'm always actively looking for free stuff that's going to enhance the experience for our children and help them in their life chances and be successful moving forward.
Sorry, Ben, can I just say that there are some different types of practices that are happening up here in Blackpool on the Fylde Coast. In particular, we've got the Youth Future Foundation. So that's very much looking at about how they're engaging schools alongside with businesses as well. And there's also something called, and I'm going to get this wrong, and Andrew Spate, the young man who's developed this, is like a compass curriculum. So they're actually looking at, with one particular school, I think, which is an academy, they're actually looking about exploring different types of other like vocational pathways for young people as well. So I know that there is a lot of work that's happening to that, linking in with businesses, employability skills. Got something called like young advisors or youth advisors who are linking in with the business to say, this is how, you get young people into employment. It's very much focused on that employment element. But I do think that, again, I think it depends on the school as well. But I do think certainly on the Fylde Coast, there is test and learn that they're looking at certainly at the moment. And hopefully within that will increase that motivation with young people, support their mental well-being. But I also appreciate it's not always about getting a young person into employment. I think we've got to bring in those enrichment activities, creativity, art, music, whatever else it is, and perhaps helping with that transition for young people.
Yeah. Just moving back a little bit to the first question, because I felt like I sort of moved over quickly. We started chatting about inevitably money or something like that. But I think with a lot of schools, some schools do this better than others, I feel, depending on the emphasis in the school itself and obviously, the community that they're sitting in. But there are signals sent out to certain young people if schools are very focused on the idea of success being around exams and things like that, and going to university and whatever else. And I often hear and still hear young people categorizing themselves into two ways. Either they're smart or they're not smart. And that smart is based on exams or, so the career trajectories are not only emphasized by, class, gender, etc. And you find that quite a lot in FE colleges. When you go to FE colleges, the mechanics is full of guys, interspersed with some young women, and then hair and beauty is full of women. And so again, even there, you've got very clear trajectories. But it does send a signal that they are exam factories, and therefore there's certain things that are valued and that instinctively sort of pushes people away. But so schools could be better at building relationships, and I do think that youth work is, because it's voluntary, because it's based on relational practice and community based, I think youth work is not only about, working with young parents as a mentor, which has some issues as well, but I think everybody could benefit from youth work, and I've seen this across different professions. Mm-hmm. So whether that be psychology, whether that be social work, whether that be teachers, because actually we get into these sort of weird silos of I'm a teacher, I'm not a youth worker, or I'm a social worker, I'm not a youth worker. But actually, I think youth work cuts across all of this. It's about relationships, it's about voluntary engagement, because I saw it so many times when I was working in children's safeguarding, that the social worker would take the child to Starbucks on their first meeting. And that drove me nuts. And I'll explain why. Not that you shouldn't go to Starbucks or whatever. But I'm thinking, well, what else is the young person coming for if you've just taken them to Starbucks? Like, you should be meeting the young person where they want to meet, finding out what they're interested in. Your second meeting should be based around that. Starbucks and stuff comes later. But there's a lot of pressure on social workers to meet children. But youth work can kind of figure out ways around those relationships and building relationships. And then it becomes voluntary. And I think the way teachers are trained is not necessarily in relational stuff, although we've seen a surge in trauma-informed practice talking about relationships. But I just think the youth work cuts across quite a lot of that. And I think youth work should be seen as more holistic. They could influence a lot of different professions rather than just youth workers coming in and going, you work with, the kid who's not coming into school. But touching on what Stuart was saying, I think everybody could be a mentor. It's just finding the right mentor for the right child, because the child needs to choose as well. It can't just be, you're going to be a good role model because you're a guy for a guy type situation.
And I think youth work is so much more than is mentoring. I think there is a place where actually, yes, we don't wear capes. We're not superheroes, and there's an element of that mentorship. But I don't think we have to shy away from the fact that that we are a profession. We are absolutely based on that relationship. It is voluntary. It is about developing that person-centered approach. Young people having that voice, so actually they lead very much on what they want. They choose to engage with us. We talk about place-based, whether that's place-based, that we go to them. Conversations that I've had with other colleagues in terms about the training, the development, I would absolutely advocate. And one of my things I've wrote on here is, and I've said this for years, doing a bit of youth work training when teachers are trained. Just doing a little bit of a touch on it, because I still meet people who are teachers who don't even like children and young people. I keep on saying, why are you in the profession? That's not to say that at all. So you might want to cut that bit out, Ben. But one of the things I would say, Craig, I'm going to go back to what Craig said about that trajectory in young people. We've just facilitated space with a group of young people who we've trained up as action researchers. And they've just done a piece of research based on what information, advice and guidance they get in school, in college, uni, wherever, and how that impacts on their health determinants as they get older. And it's been really interesting that we still have bias opinion within our information, advice and guidance in schools. And they're actually coming up to Glasgow next month for the International Community Conference, and they're delivering on that research. So it's still happening now. We've still got that basis of, and this cuts across all genders. So it's been really interesting when they've done some of that research with their peers about what type of information advice they get or not, as the case may be.
Just to add to what I was saying, I'll give a perfect example of this. And the last thing I'll say is, before I left, local authority, I put together, because there was a really poor engagement within children's services, so children weren't turning up for basic meetings with social workers, children in need meetings, doing all those sorts of stuff, which obviously is crucial for hitting their milestones and coming off the register or social service register. So what I suggested was having a youth work team that could actually engage with the young people and be more of a mentor, as Stuart mentioned, that could be the sort of cultural intermediary between social work and their own life. So somebody was advocating for them, somebody was working with them in, doing additional stuff as opposed to just some of the statutory work. And within a year, we got an Ofsted good practice, the first one in youth work had for many, many years. And the Ofsted inspector said, well, how do you get young people to engage? And just said, well, give them a choice. You don't have to work with us, but if you do, we'll try and help you do A, B, C, and D. Or you come up with A, B, C, and D, we'll work on that. And I mean, eventually you had sort of 10 young people coming in, running in at 8 o'clock in the morning just to meet with Ofsted and say, look, this is great. We've got somebody who can help us, which feeds into what Stuart was saying. So giving young people a sense of agency, a choice, and it's not rocket science. It's just basic human relationships, isn't it? Because we know that if you're a police officer or you're a teacher or that you do kind of come with authority and power, and which is off-putting for a lot of young people. It's kind of how you break that power down. And I think the types of youth work that certainly I was trained in is very good at that.
I would chuck in something there as well, just in an interesting kind of way that many teachers work. Like, there's loads of teachers that the front and center, their whole thing is to care for young people, social emotional support. But I guess the challenges of a curriculum, means you do have certain things you have to do. But there'll be, many similarities with the way lots of staff work. I guess that the question mark would be then, so for youth workers to go into schools, is it voluntary? Because are you just going into a school and saying, well, look, you don't have to work if you don't want to, like we can leave. Are you trying to take that kind of methodology into the school? And then do you do that if the school is paying? I mean, I've done that loads. And the schools are paying, because I just think, actually, if you don't want the support, you don't have to have it. And 9 times out of 10, that flicks a switch and they think, oh.
Well, you wouldn't start with that, this conversation.
You couldn't do that.
You wouldn't walk into a room and start.
That's the point. It's like they might have the social-emotional kind of, the support at the front of what they really want to do as a professional, but they don't have that option, do they? That's the challenge.
I think it comes down to lots of things, going back to what I was saying about multi-agency working in relationships. So for me, like Stuart is very open to having people in, but of course Stuart would lay the groundwork before we came in. It would very much be a case of, this isn't about A, B, C, and D. This is about, and that the fact that the young people would respect Stuart or having a teacher that they do respect or whatever, I think that opens doors, and then that allows those conversations to happen a little bit more freely, as we would do around teachers. And because, I mean, we may have this as well. The young people are shocked, or used to be shocked, when I told them I was a teacher. They're like, oh, you would never be a teacher. No way. So again, it's that type of just who you are in and around young people. But yeah, so the school would sort of set the groundwork, because young people, without knowing anybody, would say no, of course. But I think the vast majority do say yes, once you've given them 10, 15 minutes of their time.
Well, it's that informed choice, isn't it? You don't know what you don't know, do you? So I guess you've got to start somewhere. And if we apply a lens of whether or not we're talking around Hart's Ladder or the Lundy model, are we ultimately doing that adult initiative and initiated in terms of actually let's see? Because young people have said repeatedly, well, I didn't know that was happening. I wasn't aware of that. And that's on us really as a sector to ensure that is co-designed with them, so they are aware of what opportunities are out there for them. I guess the element is, once we've explained that, they then choose whether or not they want to engage. I would feel very uncomfortable if I went into a school and then the young people came and said, right, you have to be in this lesson, because I'd be like, well, I'm losing them straight away anyway, you know what I mean? But I wouldn't have the authority or the agency, if you want to frame it that way, to then say to them, well, there's the door if you don't want to, because they'd all go, right, okay, I'm off. Do you know what I mean? But I do know that we have been very fortunate to work alongside some of the schools where we've been developing some of our young women's work and young men's work, that they have, and it's down to individuals, they've really supported us and we've worked together. And now we have some of those young people who access and who are some of our, like I want to coin the phrase creators, not consumers, and developing and moving forward as young leaders. But I do think that there's and we have to own this as youth workers. I think we have fought for that long to get our profession recognised, and I'm still saying, but I've got my degree in youth work, because I still do think we are seen as not as professional as our social work and teacher colleagues. Oh, yeah. I would absolutely say that, even in COVID, when I worked with the NYA, and massive kudos to my colleagues who were there, who really fought to get that key worker status for youth workers, because it was recognised that it was youth workers who really supported young people through COVID, alongside our colleagues who were needing to teach some of those young people within school. But ultimately, the value of youth work, I think, went up a notch. And having this national youth work strategy now, which I think Lisa Namby said it's the first strategy since before the iPhone was invented, is ludicrous to think that. But we are where we are now. And I really do hope that people recognise youth work as a profession. And yes, you have trusted adults, but we're much more than trusted adults.
Can I just an aside question? I'm primary, but when you kind of do that multi-agency work, and let's just say you've got a team around a child, are you ever invited into those meetings? Because who's going to know those children really, really well? The youth workers who the youth are going to open up to more than a teacher generally, more than the social workers generally. Are you ever invited to those multi-agency meetings?
Yeah, colleagues. Sorry, go on, Craig.
I'll say this from experience, and because I've worked in different professions within children's safeguarding and around local authorities, I've been in hundreds of children's in need meetings, etc., as a representative of social services or youth work or whatever else. The power dynamics within those meetings is incredible. So, for example, there's a hierarchy of professions that instinctively people lean to or look to in relation, and at the bottom is always the child. And partly because they're never there, because they're like, well, I'm not turning up for this. Why would I turn up for this? And there's a little box that says, what does the child say? And the older they get, it's always interesting to see what they write. There's either nothing or F off. So within that sort of agency meetings, if you do get invited, and that certainly isn't always the case, but it's usually something like the police or the doctors or the hierarchy. So they're the ones who have the most, they're seen as the most professional. So therefore the ones that have the highest power. You've got the teachers, you've got potentially nurses, you've got social worker who's trying to chair this, you've got advocates, you've got parents. And the parents are, if the parents turn up, the child might not turn up because of obviously the issue might be with the parent. And you've got a youth worker that's trying to get the child in the room, or it's incredible power dynamics that gets played out because, as Debbie's saying, some people are seen as more professional or more disciplined, when actually youth work or youth workers are by far the closest to the child in terms of what they want out of that meeting. So that's a study in itself, but certainly I've noticed that, and my power has changed depending on the role that I played within that room. No question at all. So,
do you think that changes though with a youth work background? Do you think that you're biased to that kind of fundamental way of working then influences you in a different power dynamic position?
Once weekly, I had to explain to social work managers what youth work is. So they came in and they were like, well, no, you can take this child to the movies, or you can go and play pool with that child, or you can go and take them out of the classroom. When actually, I had to explain what youth work is to various professions, because people don't know what youth work is. They know what teachers are, they know what police officers do, they know what a doctor is, but they don't know what youth work is. So there's a level of understanding that just doesn't exist around youth work.
That comes back to that question, doesn't it? That we've kind of glided over a little bit. But so if people don't know what it is, how can they value it? Do you know what I mean? Is it valued? And I suppose the question mark, if people don't know what it is, and you get your standardized kind of from back in the day around the pool table, obviously there's a lot more going on. Even if you are engaging a young person around a pool table, building relationships that then go off in different directions to other support, it's not just to throw that out as a 1970s kind of scenario. There's that's the way you do build relationships. It is relationships that we're talking about. Isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
And I think, like I said, I've got some of my friends will say, so what do you do? Are you a social worker? No. You teacher? No, not in this particular profession. Right, okay, so what's youth work? But then when you see it in action, and I think this is a thing that, somebody will talk to a young person and go, right, I'm a youth worker. And I think that's the bit where you get the youth work in the purest form. Sound very elitist here, but I'm trying to explain myself, to go, have you got your degree? Have you got your level 6? You're not a youth worker. And say, well, hang on a minute, let's just explore this. We've got level 1, level 2, level 3, progressing into a level 6. And for many years, oh gosh, quite a long time ago, weren't we allowed to take some of the teaching qualification and map that across so it could be mapped across to do the youth work standards as such. But I do think that, and we may be guilty as this, we've allowed our profession to be watered down, Ben. Whether that is being forced upon us or whether or not we have just conformed to that and quietly got on with things because we're worried about stuff. But I think this goes back to where were we sat around the table when funders said, oh no, you can't pay them JNC qualifications, that cost per hour is far too high, you need to get somebody cheaper in. And I think we possibly have maybe allowed that to happen as well. Some of my colleagues who may watch this video might shoot me down, but I do think that there's an element of actually working with funders as well to say, no, if you have got a qualified youth worker with 10 years experience, like Craig was saying, that has been within those environments, that's sitting at those tables, representing the voice of young people and ensuring that, why shouldn't they not have some of that protection in terms of JNC and be paid accordingly as well, rather than going, no, we'll just put you on an hourly rate of maybe the minimum wage.
Yeah.
Which is what we had with NCS. We got dilated with NCS.
Well, I mean, this is going off on a tangent a little bit, but it's all interconnected, so we'll roll with it. I mean, there's a question mark, isn't there? Is about, would any one of us go and pay £9,000 a year to become a youth worker? It might be we've gone through youth provisions growing up and we had a brilliant experience that supported us. Would you go into those roles, even though you valued it because it made a difference to you and you've seen the impact, or you've seen the impact it had on other people, or you want to work with young people and a school setting maybe wasn't where you wanted to go, or it might have been? If you were looking at that question mark now, I find it hard to believe. I don't know. It's like, would I go with that thinking £9,000 a year, and can I guarantee that I'll have a full-time job? Like, the reality is, most of the staff, and probably the same with you, Deborah, with a small organisation, you'll have lots of staff that are qualified, that have got lots of skills and lived experience, but they'll probably be working in different jobs. They might be working in education, they might be working in social work, they might be working at Tesco's, they might be working wherever. And then they'll do those X amount of hours because they have that love and, desire to make a difference through youth work. But I would guess that probably a lot of those people now would grow up, they would have had limited youth provisions that they would have gone to because of the obvious things of the cuts. And maybe quite a lot of those people that do, they will go into teaching. I would, thinking about it now, if you got those options, you just don't have that job. I don't know, maybe I'm ranting a little bit by that, but if that was your offer now, would have you done your degrees, you two at the bottom, in youth work?
For me, like, anybody can call themselves a youth worker, right? There's nobody can call themselves a social worker without being qualified, but anybody can call themselves a youth worker. So it has been diluted, no question. The other thing, of course, is the reason I got into teaching was that's all I knew. So my PE teacher was, I'll do what he does. It wasn't so, but because you don't see youth workers as much now, and those types of influences. So you're absolutely right. It just isn't front and center of what we do. It's been diluted and changed, and there's much more to sort of gravitate towards. So being a teacher or being something, where youth work used to be something, it's no longer. So yeah, from my perspective, that's certainly. But I'll keep quiet from that, but because I'll go off on a tangent and nobody needs that.
It'd be interesting on the other perspective with Stuart. Just sorry, Deborah, we'll come back to you.
Go. Yeah.
Because Stuart, you said you've done bits and pieces of youth work, and I know we've spoken about this before, but I mean, I don't want to talk for you. What was that journey? Was it you were doing bits and pieces alongside training to be a teacher because you wanted to be a teacher? Do you know what I mean? That was a bit part thing, maybe. I don't know.
When I was younger, I wanted to be a vet, Ben, but
did you?
Stuart,
I think you'd make a lovely vet. You've got that calm, and I think you could. I think you need to retrain. Never too late, mate.
With all those hours you've got,
I'll take that advice. I mean, if I'm really honest, obviously when you're going for your career, you want to earn a living, and I'm gonna go on a slight tangent. When people say, "Oh, if you weren't doing your job now, what job would you do?" And I say this, that I would be a youth worker or a counsellor, because my passion is that kind of one-to-one, that mentoring, coming alongside people and helping them in their, kind of growing up and helping them to be successful in whatever they want or what they view success is. And so that's my passion. But as we have discussed, that there isn't that money in that, I suppose. And so that's kind of, I suppose, when I kind of decided which kind of avenue do I want to go down, it was kind of went into teaching so I could still kind of have that impact on the lives of children. But I miss, and because I don't do that youth work anymore, I miss that tremendously, because I feel that's where a strength of mine is. And just as you guys were talking, I was just thinking, without going down this rabbit hole of kind of public sector money, government spending, this is our next generation, the future generation, and you want to put the money and invest in them, because you always want, as a parent, that your children to be better than you. And that should be the attitude of a government, that we want our children, and our future generation to be better than us. And I feel we've lost that. And I feel that we've gone on a tangent, we're going down technology, which we can go and talk about that. Actually, since technology's come in, children are now less cognitively able than before. But anyway, so I just feel like we've gone down the wrong route, and actually we lost that relationships. Hence why we see so much issues going on in society, because we have lost sight of actually what matters, and it's those relationships and viewing people and youth and young people as people. Sorry, I've gone on my soapbox here.
That's all right. Don't apologise. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Deborah, do you want to jump on your soapbox, or?
I'm always on my soapbox. And I make no apologies. I think this is great. So, being obviously, linking in with the University of Cumbria and doing some of that higher education, obviously the main thing was around that widening participation. So I just want to come back to what you said about Ben, about, what would we do now if it was about, right, it's going to be £9,000 a year. I was the first generation when in my family going to university, but also when I did go, they just scrapped a free university degree. So I was the first year Blumenauck that had to actually start paying for it. So I did leave uni with people, you're not allowed to call it a debt, but I did leave that obviously with money owed to the government for me gaining my degree. But I think when we're talking around widening participation, that's great. Be inclusive, get as many young people as you can to university. But it's much more than just getting bums on seats and getting them to get the degree, because actually it's about go back to that information, advice and guidance. What are the pathways for young people once they leave? So we talked about, you get your degree, but there's no guarantee you'll get a youth work job. I know young people and my friends and colleagues and their children who have got degrees in geography and all sorts of things, and they've never gone into that same profession. So I don't want us to silo youth work as that particular degree, because I think we could start a whole conversation about degrees and about pathways and opportunities and privileged, absolutely 100%. But what I want to probably explore as well is about that aspect of the youth work apprenticeship that's coming, that I've been fortunate enough to work alongside the Boathouse. We do some partnership work, and so I'm supporting their level 3 and level 6 apprentices. And they've got a really good model where they've been able to actually bring in business to actually support paying for their members of staff, which is phenomenal. So we've been able to draw down the levy from the NYA, so that obviously pays for the actual youth work apprentice. But alongside that, you've got to find a position that's 30 hours a week. And like you said, Ben, not a lot of organisations can, absolutely not. We're basing things on 16-hour weeks, 8-hour weeks contracts. Some we've got youth workers coming in that just do 2 sessions a night. So the thought of trying to create a 30-hour a week post, I don't know about you, Ben, but so there are some real great opportunities with the apprentice, because obviously you're working on the job, but in reality, unless you can guarantee that you can get that 30-hour a week post, I don't think as many people are being able to to be able to highlight that. So yeah, I think that just needs to be explored in a little bit more detail as well.
I wonder whether there's something, there's a sweet spot within that, because there's no doubt about it. The way of working, we've already spoke about it. You know, schools do benefit from people outside coming into schools, offering a different perspective, different way of working. It helps, you know, the young people. It helps the teachers as well. You know, there's a benefit to everyone, obviously to society as well. I wonder whether there's something in that about having that experience for someone that's doing, say, those 30 hours in smaller organizations, that actually, you know, it's going to be very difficult to make up that role to be sustainable for a small organization that's still trying to do, you know, do as much as they can in communities within youth work settings. Well, there's some of that, you know, half and half within mainstream education as well. And then that suddenly, doesn't that do the things that we know that used to work really well back in the day, where you've got people then that are signposting those young people to the youth provisions and the opportunities out of school. And then you've got someone that's, but then because those skills, they're all, you know, great skills you'd learn within education as well as you'd learn within youth work, and that might make some of that a bit more sustainable than having it all dumped on, you know, smaller organizations' laps where you're spinning so many plates, and it maybe might answer some of the questions we spoke about earlier. I don't know. I'm just a thought.
Point. I think it's a good point.
Should we?
What was the question?
I think maybe we jump on to the next question.
Ben's probably thinking, I'm never bringing these two together again. These three are all over.
This every time. The panel discussions is meant to be an hour, so just saying.
Well, but can I highlight those something, because we're talking around schools. We need to factor in those young people who aren't in school, and either for whatever reason, whether or not they have been as. So some of the research that I was very fortunate to do was some of the international research, again, with the University of Cumbria and our colleagues in Denmark and Norway and Sweden, was looking around that element of young people's experiences with being neat, if you want to frame it, with labeling that. And one of the research that we worked alongside talked about young people being pushed out rather than dropping out. They were actually pushed out of the education system. And we are very aware that some academies may be prone to that. Some schools may be prone to that in terms of pushing those young people out who don't fit the norm in terms of those exam expectations. But we've got a high percentage now, certainly on the Fylde coast, of families who are choosing to actually homeschool their children. So if we're talking around that enrichment, where is that? Now, I know Blackpool Football Community Trust, we work alongside my colleague Selena, is doing some fantastic work with engaging young people around actually those that are home educated. So I think that's just something we need to explore as well, Ben, or have that on the peripheral when we're talking around that.
Just to say, I've seen a complete increase in children being home educated that I've never seen before. That's happening more and more.
Yeah, so there's got to be a reason for that. Why is that happening?
Also, young people voting with their feet as well. You know, social media being a big influence on, you know, what young people perceive to be an imagined future, but also just the lack of opportunities in some communities. You know, realistically, is a French GCSE going to get you a job in, you know, in Dundee? You know, the chances of me meeting a French person in a Dundee council estate is minimal. So what's the value in that? But the issue we've got is, you know, effectively in a lot of ways it's sales. You were trying to sell something to a young person. We know if they value it, it will take them a long way. I mean, the idea of the French GCSE sounds ridiculous in that context around Dundee or whatever, but actually it's the love of learning and, you know, the type of language.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, and I include myself in this, like that didn't come until I was like 28. You know, I didn't read a book. I remember seeing Lord of the Rings, a full big book, and I thought, who would read that? I mean, that's just ridiculous. But actually, it's the first book I ever read cover to cover when I was 20, and I thought that was just the best thing ever. But there's a real gap between the love of learning and instilling that. And I think home education, if it's done well and you have the resources, absolutely it can be effective. But I do worry that some parents are taking the children out for the types of reasons that are not really founded in reality in that sense.
That's valid.
Even the opportunity for lifelong learning, and and because people do come here, don't they, from different times. They're going to school, going to youth provisions, not ready to knuckle down for whatever reasons, things going on at home, a million reasons. And then suddenly later on, when they are ready, is there the opportunities then for them maybe to step into those summer things if that's what they want to do?
But
I don't know.
it's that social entrepreneur. It's really harnessing, some of that creativity, some of those skills that, school is not for everyone. I hated school. Do you know what I mean? I conformed, but for me it was not the be all and end all, and I just think that, and I guess that's down to what we said before about youth workers or teachers. If you've got a teacher, you've got a youth worker who really believes in you and listens to you. I mean, I love the video of Ian Wright when he's on the football pitch, and his old teacher, or his old, I think, walked in. He
Yes.
thought he died, and he was like, "You were the one person that believed in me." And the impact that still had on a man who's in his 40s and 50s from 20, 30 years ago, you can't you can't say to a funder, if you fund this youth provision or what have you, in about 30 years' time, I'm going to show you the impact, because that's the reality sometimes of youth work. You do not see that until you're way downstream, but funders are expecting instant, case studies, and you're like, well, actually, we know this is going to be the long-term impact of it. So I think there's just some, and I think funders are getting better with that. But yeah, it's an interesting concept.
My
I've lost my
only,
train of thought now. Sorry.
because I write quite a lot about alternative provisions and separate spaces almost, which alternative provisions inevitably, anything outside the mainstream classroom at the moment seems to be an alternative provision. My only concern around things like home education or schools not, I mean, I hated school. It's just a social event. It's something you got through rather than learn from. And it touches on what Stuart was saying earlier about mentors. What we do as adults is we tend to assume that somebody would be a good role model or mentor, and then apply, say, well, you can be with that one. And then invariably it's usually, well, for example, I had a year and a half waiting list within children's safeguarding for a male role model. Well, actually, gender doesn't really matter. It's about relationships. It matters in certain contexts, in certain situations, 100%. My fear is if we remove children from school, they don't have the level of choice and agencies to choose those people. So my person that I looked to was the PE teacher, because he had the level of flexibility and the humour that I liked, but then art teacher. And he still speaks to me on LinkedIn today, and exactly what you're saying, Debbie, that person who, if I didn't have art, I would never have met this person. He would have never encouraged me to do certain things. So what I don't want to do is restrict young people's choice over who they see as a mentor and who they can access. And I think by removing it, I worry that adults will then start making choices about who should be in the young person's life. And of course, young people choose their own friends and stuff like that as well. So it's a kind of mixed bag, but it's worth discussing, I think, on a wider level, no question.
I want to say something to Stuart about because I think there's an element of, we can bang on about youth work and and sometimes there's free youth workers here, and we're looking at Stuart, head teacher, and education gets dum dum dum, and we all know
You're with friends, Stuart. You're with
well,
friends.
he knows that.
He knows that.
He's absolutely brilliant. I'm going to read something in a minute from a young person. He supported, and he was brilliant. I've seen it firsthand. But I think there's you were talking about that Ian Wright thing, and I was out with a friend of mine who is a teacher and his partner, and I bumped into my old tutor from school, which is 8 million years ago. I don't know how long. I can't work it out that quickly. I was at Tearaway, didn't finish school, didn't even get past year 9.
That does surprise me, Ben.
It's shocking. Yeah, but you know me a little bit. But the point was, I 100% had the same Ian Wright moment. Like, absolutely. And I just think that there's something to be said with, I just think about our tutor group. There was nothing else going on particularly other than the support of that. She did have a nightmare class. And maybe she was particularly good at dealing with, us lot. But absolutely, that was, for me, she was a youth worker. She had all those skills, all those social emotional skills that you would find within a youth club in a school setting. And it absolutely dragged kids through that were getting expelled, kicked out, suspended. God, it was going off all over the place. So I know it definitely works, and there's definitely people within the education system that bring that and still bring that. And I just wanted to say that because I just think I don't know what tutor groups are like now, but I suspect there's a lot going on. But actually, that's a moment where you can give that support and guidance.
The reason you remember those teachers, and I can remember mine too, is because they are the teachers who cared and spent their time and potentially time, in their lunch or break, I don't know, where they showed that they cared and would want to invest in you as a person. And that is the key. For going back on my soapbox again, it's those relationships. And that's what our young people, our children need. Someone who care. And that's why it's so important.
That's the alignment, isn't it? Yeah.
I've just to make sure that, because bear with me, because I have been had a long day today, so I want to make sure I read it right. But obviously, I mean, one of my favourite quotes is from the poet Maya Angelou, that says, "I've learned that people will forget what you've said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you make them feel." And I think that is the key point. So it doesn't matter whether or not you've got an MBE, whether you drive around in a Ferrari, or whether or not, whatever it is, it's actually how did you make that person feel at that particular point in time. And I think for children and young people, Stuart, it's about actually, do they feel visible? So do you mean, so they don't have to be with the cliquey group or the intelligent group or any of that, which we know we have those identities and those communities within school. There's actually, how is that individual young person or that child made to feel, and do they feel like they're seen regardless?
And that's why, if the children feel like, okay, someone actually sees me for who I am, it just takes that one person to kind of make that young person just blossom and come to life and think, you know what, that person sees me, believes in me, I'm going to do what I want to do because I feel like I've got that person, behind me, supporting me and cheering me along, placards and pom-poms and everything. And again, that's what's missing, because unfortunately in today's society, you will find broken homes where children do not get that, and they don't have that cheerleader. And that's why, again, youth work is so important, because you can be that cheerleader and that person cheering them on, and who sees that person. And teacher can do it to a certain extent, but they are obviously bound by all the kind of professionalism that comes with the teacher, but where the youth worker, you've got more, that those boundaries are wider, and you can really get into knowing that child, and as you say, kind of going to play a game of pool and really getting to know them and really cheering them on. Don't know where I'm going with that, but I just feel it's so important.
Let me give an example, and it'd be great to get Craig's view on this, because I know he's been sat there waiting to jump in a minute, because I think we're trying to make the episodes a certain kind of size, but I definitely want to get the young person's question in. And that's obviously super important, and it's actually someone who Stuart mentored on our GAP program, which was a year-long program which supported young people into opportunities based on their passion, whether that be education or a job. The key point was supporting them to get to where they want to go. So I'm just going to read it out. I did ask him to put a question down. It's got this all on film, but as soon as you put it like that near a laptop, I've been told now that no one can hear it. So I'm sorry, Theo. I'm going to have to read it out for you, mate. This is the first bit. Then there's a question, because it wasn't as simple as him just giving me a question. Bless him.
Never is, Theo. Love it, Theo.
Yeah. So Theo from Southmead, originally Knoll West. I feel like mainstream education helped me get the grades I needed, but it didn't really build my confidence or prepare me for real life. It was actually a year-long GAP program that helped me believe in myself, develop practical skills, and be proactive about finding opportunities. And honestly, I don't think I'd have made it to university without that experience. His question is, why doesn't the school system do more of that? Why aren't confidence, real life skills, and support into opportunities built into mainstream education? Or why isn't there more investment in youth workers to provide that kind of support for other young people like me?
Go on, Craig.
Sorry.
Well, it touches on exactly what I was going to say. I was just literally going to add one word to what Stuart was saying, because Stuart talked about care. I would add to that and say connection. So making a connection with the young person at some point. And again, that doesn't need to be rocket science. It literally is taking an interest, finding out what they're interested in. So, for example, it might be football, it might be hair, it might be clothes or whatever else. And every time you see that young person, it would be, oh, how did Man City do last night? Or just winding them up for 2 seconds as you pass them in the hall. Because what that's building up to is an investment in the time of crisis. That you walk into the room and you're no longer that person who's having a fake conversation about, you're genuinely a caring person who's already connected with that individual. And I think what Theo was talking about is exactly that, is the types of mentors, the type of people you look up to, the types of things you can do that build on those types of relationships that might lead to being a different kind of teacher or social worker or a different kind of person. Because those things are already happening in the school. It's just how they're valued or how are seen to be valued. And there isn't space given to that, unfortunately, a lot of the time, because, as we originally said, schools don't have a lot of choice over certain things, because ultimately they're judged by accountability measures that don't necessarily value relationships or connections or care. Those are things that have been described as fuzzy.
Can I just pop in? Sorry, I'm just going to grab something, so I'm going to go off screen so it links to what you're saying, Craig. So sorry to interrupt.
Perfect.
Carry on.
Absolutely. So for me, it's that it's care, connection alongside relationships. Relationships are kind of more personal, and I think that fits better with youth work because there is a boundary there between what is professionalism, where teachers are, I think, a little bit more bounded in terms of their types of connections. So for me, it's care, connections, a little bit of relationship. It's very difficult though, because the teachers who are very good at that tend to get overloaded with some young people.
Yes, they do.
And they can burn out very quickly, where other teachers are kind of just teaching, and then that's kind of what they do. So there is a big burden on people who kind of take the extra to spend lunch hour with Ben, throwing chairs around and making connections. Because you can only do that so long before you kind of burn out in a way.
Yeah.
So if I go back to my kind of first ever point, or my first challenge, where I spoke to that person at the dinner table and I said the system was broken. So that challenge I took away and I was like, okay, well, what can we do? How can I think out of the box? And just kind of on the question what Craig was saying there, what can we do? How can we encourage teachers to do more of that connection work and kind of see the children for who they are? So we created a golden thread through our curriculum, through our school, called leadership. And it's all about everyone is a leader. You can all lead yourself well. You have to lead yourself well. And so we created a passport, which you can't see, the leadership passport. And leaders of today and tomorrow. So leaders of today means how you learn how to lead yourself, and then leaders of tomorrow is kind of what you're learning through our curriculum and through our teachers, etc., and what you take and what you can take on board to lead yourself in secondary school and beyond. And so they then go on this journey in here, which links all to our school values, which is learn and lead, endeavour, aspire, respect, nurture. But basically it's capturing and encouraging. So we've incorporated into our curriculum where the children are learning about that resilience, learning about confidence, and then they get to capture it and put it in this passport, which follows them all the way through school. And then at the end of year 6, we have a mini graduation, but it's all about them as a person. You have graduated, you've led yourself well. We are so proud of you, because let's just say, and this is so inclusive, you can have that child who really struggles academically and is that person who throws the tables and chairs. But we're actively encouraging them, like, okay, well, next time you're getting that frustrated, what can we do differently? We want to celebrate that actually you took a deep breath. We want to celebrate that you counted to 10. We want to celebrate that actually, instead of punching the other child, you refrained from that. So we then capture that and we celebrate them as a person. So that challenge I got from that person at the dinner table has made me think out of the box. Okay, are not just confined to the national curriculum. We can do these things outside of lessons, and we can support each and every child to be successful or, on that journey. And it means that every teacher knows their children, because we do, I monitor it. I get teachers to monitor this and go, well, tell me about this child. What are they working on at the moment that's personal to them, as opposed to maths and English? Yes, we have those targets too, but actually, how are you actively encouraging and building up that relationship with each and every child in their area? Tell me what they're good at outside of school. And so that is a small way of working on what Theo has said there about building up that confidence, because the teachers know what each and every child areas that they need to work on in their personal development as such. And I rabbited on for too long.
No, you haven't. That's been great.
It's about them being seen, is it, for them as a person, and been celebrating a million different things that won't fit into a curriculum, but could be something that is the aspirations of that young person, or something they just enjoy doing. And if you haven't got anything to celebrate about that young person, because he tends to, regulate in ways of, getting involved in I don't know, bad behaviour or whatever it might be, then what has he got to shout about, or she?
Well, exactly.
And maybe that is actually uncovering some of those things in a way which, might make them believe that people care and they've got something to offer.
And I think, Deborah, you mentioned it earlier, some teachers don't like children. This is a way of actually,
we've all felt this.
You are going to know your children, and you are going to spend time with them, and you are going to make them feel seen and cared for and invested in.
I'm going to be controversial and say every interview that I've done with social work and, in relation, I think if I could have this choice, my first question would be, do you actually like spending time and working with children? I think that would be my first question, because
actually, how honest would they? But how honest would they be, though?
I don't
want that job.
That is fundamentally what it is, isn't it? You enjoy spending time with the people you're with
and listening to them, and that's the thing, isn't it? And that's I'm sorry, I've just got visions of the Bridget Jones films where she's getting interviewed by children's TV, and they go, and do you have any children? She goes, oh God, no, I can't stand them. And they're like, yeah, you're not for the job. But I think that's a really good point, Craig, that you said there, because people will probably say yes. But I think there needs to be something embedded within people's probation to go, right, okay, let's ask young people, how have they engaged with you? And that's why when it's done well, you have young people who are part of that interview process, but that has to be invested in, and you have to give young people the proper training and support to actually recognise what they're looking for in that particular person, and have the equality in terms of saying, right, okay, your thoughts, your opinions, your non-bias on that person who's applying for that job is equal to the CEO or the managers who are interviewing that person as well, and I think that's crucial. Can I just make a point what you said there about the schools, and listen, we know schools are under a huge amount of pressure. It's all about the SATs, or it's all about the measurable academic outputs, was something that Craig certainly alluded to, and I know Stuart, you're probably with it at the minute as well. But I do think in terms of youth work does fill that gap, and I cringe when I say that. But we do, because going back to what you said, Craig, I actually think that it is relational. It's massively 99% of it is that, and it is, like you said, looking at that holistic sort of offer that we can provide. And just going back, I guess, to what I talked before about that compass curriculum, and again, I'm going to get told off people in Blackpool because I've got that wrong, but it's a compass and it's got a curriculum in it, and it's about vocational sort of programs. I guess the issue then with us or the challenge is there going to be enough investment in that, so that actually there's long-term investment, and actually, I guess, trusting the process of what is a good youth worker and what is good youth work. Whether or not the NYA, us being on, are we on a register now, aren't we? I should know that, I'm on it. We're on a register, we've got this investment, the National Youth Strategy, we're looking at seeing what else is coming out in terms of professional development, CPD, and a change in how people are qualified. So I don't know, but I do think that some policymakers, did I say that? Some policymakers are recognising that something needs to change, but we need long-term investment. That's for me.
And with that long-term investment, we could then support mainstream education in ways that we spoke about that's happened well in the past, which does exactly what you just said. It kind of fits in neatly between to support that social emotional kind of well-being, which sometimes gets lost because of the nature of education. It just, I don't know how it can't be. You don't want it to be joined up, to the sense that suddenly, youth clubs are in, well, this is me talking, like youth clubs are in schools, because suddenly it takes away that whole kind of, you choose to be there. But there's that way of working that fits within, and maybe it might have to, if it's going to be a long-term solution, because it may be part of that statutory offer. I don't know, but I think there's something of blending it.
I think there is, but I think we've also got to really put a lens across the equity as well. We know that traditionally those young people who are from more affluent families can afford to pay for all this enrichment if their school isn't providing that. And we know that when it comes to cuts, certainly in youth provision, the majority of areas where that youth provision is cut is actually in some of those disadvantaged areas. And that's not to say that those young people do not have the skills. We absolutely know we've got some hidden talent within some of our most deprived schools where we're not even scratching the surface with some of these amazing young people. But I do think that we have to really look at what is also on offer. I mean, youth work at the point of contact, we would always want it to be free. But what about those other enrichment things? If you want to train young people to be DJs and stuff, that costs money, but actually you can go down to the DJ training school in Manchester and you can take your child there for the weekend and pay for it. And I just think we have to also look at around that equity across the board. And I suppose that's why we've got a couple of private schools here on the Fylde coast as well. Bit like Hogwarts, really, but you get me drift. And actually, is there maybe some sense of actually asking them about how are they maybe perhaps involved in the community, and how are they working alongside organisations to maybe support some of that investment as well? And that's not about the deserving poor. I'm not about that, but it's actually, this is your community where you're based. What you're doing about it? Have I gone off? I'm on my soapbox again, aren't I? I haven't even stepped off it. But you see what I mean about the. I just think we need to, if you're looking at in terms of obviously what was the question that was obviously raised in terms of about the gap year and what have you. I mean that's great, but actually can every young person say that they could do that, or is there an emphasis on actually right now you've got to get out and you've got to work? If you're not going to be at school, can you afford to take a gap year? No, you go and get a job at the pleasure beach, or you go and get a 0-hour contract and you work.
If the job exists, I think we can't touch on this, but if we're going to start talking about let's be honest, how AI and technology kicks in, that's got knowledge, hasn't it? It's got knowledge. So do we have to just sit there and learn in the same way as what we have done? I'm sure education is going to change massively, and so is employment. The people that are going to go into jobs. How many people spoke about, are you better off now being an electrician or whatever it might be? So people won't necessarily be going into some of those traditional well-paid jobs. And then, what impact does that have on traditional communities?
Conversations we've been having. Did you know that Blackpool is going to become the digital sands of the UK? We've got I'm going to get told off again because I can't remember figures. A lot of money. There's a super highway that goes from New York straight into Blackpool. We've got this huge big fiber optic. Have I got the words right? Craig, don't laugh at me. He's looking at me going, what you talking about? No. But we're trying to create this big cyber sands and actually create AI and coding jobs. And so we're talking about opportunities for young people that haven't even been created yet. But how can we harness that energy and that enthusiasm by young people when actually they've got 0-hour contracts? I've got young people in coastal communities think that they've got this stuckness and there's no enthusiasm. So I'm going to go back to Stuart and say, yes, we absolutely do need those champions with the pom-poms to go, what do you want to be? And let's have a go. Let's support you.
This happened in Dundee. So Dundee is getting, you've got the Victoria Abbey Museum, but it was partly because land is so cheap in Dundee. They were basically just giving it away, I think the issue we've got is whether young people see themselves in those jobs. So Blackpool, obviously, as we know, its heyday has long gone in relation to being a destination for holidays and whatever else. Although I had a great time at Blackpool, I'm a big fan of Blackpool.
Hey, we're all right now.
Yeah, especially that Aussie ride still there. That scared the hell out of me. But it's whether, I fear it might be gentrified. Next thing you know, Blackpool's taken over, and all those types of jobs are given to people from outside of Blackpool, as opposed to working with schools in Blackpool for the young people to see themselves in those types of jobs, because they will be looking for specific types of people with specific skill sets. And I fear that that's another opportunity to gentrify, an area that we should be working with the local population, if that makes sense. And it's the same, that's mimicked throughout the UK, really, in different coastal towns in particular.
Let me jump into Deborah, just with that one, like linked with what Craig just said then. It's like, how the hell as well are we willing to invest so much money into technology when we call that the future? And then we think about what we think of the future with young people. And it's not just the future, is it? It's the present. It's the day-to-day, their life now. I just can never get my head around this. Why aren't we putting that, a piece of that pie into actually those nurturing social emotional things that we've spoken about a million times about the different ways of working with young people? Why isn't that given the same kind of prestigious kind of thing, like the Blackpool Silicon Valley Sands? Do you know what I mean? Why isn't it like young people, they've got somewhere to go, they're out of school 3 times more than they're in it, we do that? That just seems...
I think that's very much around from the sector. So, we were the first area to have we pushed for the DCMS to come and do the first like seen and heard, provision when they were developing the National Youth Strategy, and that was working alongside our colleagues across DCMS and the I Will movement. And then we pushed back and said, right, you came to us first, you went around all the different areas, right? Are you coming back? And we had another event at the Tower. And this time we actually included business and stakeholders. And we had conversations when young people were standing up and saying, no, this is how we feel living here. This is what we want. And some of these stakeholders were going, didn't even know that this is just phenomenal. And I think there is some really good practice and some good work that's happening. I just don't think it's happening quick enough. So I think the appetite there is for policymakers, and the tide is turning. But I just do feel that. So, for instance, if I tell you, so we've got DWP have just come in. We've got a beautiful big building in the middle of Blackpool. It is actually really nice, Craig. I have to say, the prom and everything is just beautiful.
I feel like I'm going to get like tons of people from Blackpool all of a sudden.
You are
safe.
Yeah, we're celebrating 20 years of Pride in June. Tickets are still available, by the way. So, we've got an amazing, but I think also the fact is that we've got DWP, 3,000 people. My pushback is, how many of those are living in Blackpool, or they're just coming down the M55 and they leave on the M55? Where's the investment? We've also got the crime agency. Can't remember. See, my words have gone. But with that, what they have done is they've just announced a really big investment with our local college and university campus, whereby actually they're investing in those skills for young people and for the community. So actually things are happening, Ben, within that. I just think from a youth work perspective, we could do more of that on the ground, and as I would say, from the North East, at the coalface. So where can we explore some of that? Because possibly they may not be getting that from schools, Stuart. They might not be getting that information, advice and guidance. So can we be a little bit more creative? That's just what I'm thinking.
Wonder whether, look at me shining bright like a beacon.
I know.
I know.
You're like Blackpool Tower, Ben. You're lit up.
Well, I love Blackpool, me. See, that's the, but there we go.
You're invited to Dundee any time. If to compare and
we've
contrast.
Definitely gone over time, but and to be honest with you, I've had to chop into different things that we could have spoke about for days, which is frustrating in a lot of ways, but I think we have touched on quite a lot. And I wonder if we'd like to go around, all three of you, and literally just give like your last couple of words about thoughts about hope, maybe for the future. And let's finish off the conversation in a positive way. Because I think actually you've just said that, Deborah. There are lots of things happening. Craig and Stuart, do you want to chip in with something? Get that light out of my face.
Over to you, Craig.
It's for people who are considering being a youth worker. It's people who are considering those types of roles, which are fundamentally needed. Debbie was saying about you do need to have certain skill sets, certain dispositions, certain. I don't like the word love to work with children and young people, but you've got to enjoy being around children and young people.
Oh, yeah.
But what I would say, after 25 years of working in different roles, certainly not getting as much wages as other professions, teachers, social workers, I would never take back a second of that 25 years in relation to, making a difference to myself as a person, finding things out about myself, but also just being in that space with young people. Whether I changed their life or not, I probably count my hand of young people who looked to me as some sort of mentor and wanted to do things that I perhaps done. But I made their life hopefully a little bit more enjoyable, a little bit more engaging, and potentially there may be 2 or 3 young people out there who consider me, as I did, the art teacher. But in terms of hope, I'm a critical person. I've got no shoulders left. I've got so many chips coming out of it. I don't even know where I put my soapbox. I probably put it on fire. But what I would say is I think youth workers, and I think people who work in those particular ways, are some of the most hopeful, most creative people that I've come across. So even though people are critical of the systems and stuff that can repeatedly let young people down, in particular in their families, you have to have a level of hope to do that type of work, or you just wouldn't do it. So I think the people who are working on the ground with young people are the most hopeful professionals that you come across, and that includes teachers and things like that. So you wouldn't go into a classroom full of Bens on a tutoring if you weren't hopeful for their future. So I think we forget that actually people who are working in these ways are some of the kindest, caring, connecting and hopeful people that you can come across. And we need more of that in amongst young people's lives.
Oh, Craig, that was beautiful. Stuart.
Well, just to add on to that is, more recently in COVID times, the knowledge around mental health and well-being is growing, and that gives me hope, because what I'm seeing in schools, in the classroom these days, and children coming in through schools, is the education sector needs to be aware of that and need to be more supportive of that, and I am seeing that come through more and more. So I just kind of, that is hopeful, and just kind of put the challenge out there. So if you're working in schools, etc., you don't have to be confined to the national curriculum. Think out of the box and think of ways of how you can connect, and cheer on and encourage the children, and to make them more well-rounded people. So I will finish with that one.
Deborah, I know you said a couple of words a minute ago. Would you like to finish off with a couple of words on hope, or you feel like you've touched on it?
I think I've touched on it, and I echo what both Craig and Stuart have said, and I would go back to say, I think that the tide is turning a little bit. I think whether that's because we've got a national strategy now, and there's awareness of how we can actually work better together. But again, I will go back to that. We need that investment, and I echo what Craig said. There are people working, like I said, embedded within our communities who do an absolutely phenomenal job, whether that's paid or whether that's volunteer. And I really do think that, they don't need an award or something to actually get that recognition. They get that recognition and that from the relationships that they're developing with young people. And I think that sometimes that is not necessarily dismissed, but it's just glossed over. And so I think that we need to really be able to, maybe as a sector, we need to celebrate that much more. Again, I'll go back to, I just think the real challenge now is about getting long-term investment in both youth work, but also aligning perhaps the youth work and the schools curriculum. So obviously we have a curriculum, schools got a curriculum, and really seeing actually how we can embed that nationally. That is happening, and there's some great practices. So I am again really hopeful. Vintage, like Craig, 25 years plus. I don't say old anymore, definitely vintage, but But yeah, I am. I'm hopeful, and I also think that there is an emergence of some fantastic younger youth workers who are coming through. So I'm hopeful for when I retire soon that they can pick up the mantle and carry on.
Beautiful. On that note, I think we should all go into our houses and enjoy a nice little sit down after a long day, and yeah, and keep thinking about the hopeful things out there. Because yeah, everything you said, I agree with as well. And thanks for coming on. We
Thank
can
you, Ben.
cut.